I've seen a lot. Amid the celebrity allure of entrepreneurship, many exceptional entrepreneurs remain shadowed. Here, I team up with these hidden talents to unveil their challenges and successes. Dive in with me to unearth entrepreneurial gems, learn from our experiences, and get educated. Welcome to the show, man.
Hey, it's an honor.
I'm so happy you're. So I'll tell you this. Actually, well, even before we get started, but I wrote when we were starting to figure out, okay, am I going to do this podcast? Blah blah blah. So I started writing down who could I bring into this, and that would add value, conversation, da da da. So you go through, and you're right. I came up with 4 people. No, I'm like, yeah, this is going to be a problem.
Might want to rethink your
maybe
path.
this isn't going to work. Anyways, so dug a little deeper. But your name was like literally. I went back on my phone actually this morning, and I looked at the list that I originally created on my notes on my phone, and it says Billy Beck. It says health, wellness / badass.
Nice.
That was. You're a guy that I've always wanted to bring on the podcast, so I'm super.
You need more friends
here. I definitely need more friends. There's no question about that.
We have each other, so that's good.
It's an honor for you to be here.
The honor is
dude.
mine.
Like, it's really.
Thanks for thinking of me.
No, it's an obvious choice for me, honestly, because I think you represent everything that we're really trying to do from. The podcast is about like business, entrepreneurship, but it's also about personal development. And, we called it the business of doing business, but it's, business.
Great title, by the way.
Thank you so much. It took a long time to figure that one out, but it was really about personal development. It's about, business to me is about relationships. Life is about relationships. And so it's like, how do we really enhance the relationships? But we had to choose a genre. I'm a business guy. And so that's kind of what we did. And so having you on the list was all about really going like, here's a genuine badass that is just completely refined in his, we'll get into your list of accomplishments and all that kind of stuff. But it was just like, you've got a message. I love your message. I love your attitude. And yeah.
We have a similar message. That's probably why you enjoy
it. Yeah. Just to run down a little bit about your background for the audience. You've been in athletics all your life. You got started by your father in physical fitness. And, as a child, you played sports, football, soccer, hockey, baseball, track, boxing, martial arts. Like you've been through it all. But you have an undergraduate degree in exercise science. But you're Metarex world's best trainer ×2, I think. Yes. You won that competition twice. Elected to the Fitness Hall of Fame. I didn't even know that.
I didn't know either. I just was in it. I got elected. People voted on it, and then I got a message.
Dude, that's unbelievable.
Yeah, I didn't even know it was a thing.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah,
that's how good it is.
And that's you right there in a nutshell. But you've been featured on virtually every major network, magazines like Men's Health, Men's Journal, all that kind of stuff. But I think, we've known each other for, it's got to be 12 to 15 years, somewhere in there. Like, I don't know how long, it's been a while. And I've also been a client, I know exactly what you do and what you're capable of. But I think I classify you as like one of the world's classic lifelong learners. What I've seen you learn over the years is like, it's unbelievable, but you're also like one of the world's most elite personal trainers. I'm not going to get you. You've trained a ton of famous people. I'm not going to name any names. I'll let you, use those as you wish, but I don't want to, portray any, confidentiality or anything like that. So I want to be respectful in that regard, but you're the real deal, but you have this like never quit attitude, which I love about you. I love that, like your whole concept of like, you're going to be a lion or a lamb, and it's a choice. And so, but I also would say this is like, you're one of the most joyful people that I've ever had the opportunity to meet in my entire life. And I don't think I've ever told you that, but I've always admired like how joyful
You bring it
are.
out of me. I'm not always like
No,
that.
yeah, dude, I've seen you in many situations, and I know that's what you are in your core, and it's unbelievable. Like, I mean, I'd have to really dig deep to find somebody that I've experienced that's more joyful than you. So, like, welcome to the podcast. I'm super happy you're here, and I just, this is very casual. Like our listeners all know, like this is a casual thing. It's like, but we'll just start exploring and seeing what's
Thanks
what.
for having me here,
So
brother.
I'm curious what's happening in your life these days and what are you up to? And, I know that, I've recently gotten some emails from your organization. That's, I guess, the other thing I didn't mention is like, you're not just a personal trainer, you own your own business. Like you've replicated the process. So like, it's not like, one of the things about this podcast, it's about people who are doing it every day, grinding it out, and you are grinding it out. You're not just some guy that shows up at a gym, meets some clients, all that kind of stuff. You do the full package. You test people's health, you test their energy, you DNA, saliva, like all the stuff. We can talk about all that kind of stuff because, I think part of business is optimizing energy, optimizing physical vitality, optimizing, the abundance that all life has to offer. And just being really good in business is not necessarily, the world title belt that you should be wearing or the trophy that you should be carrying around on your shoulder. It's great. Congratulations to those who are super successful, but you want to be healthy. You want to live long. You want to live healthy. And you want to have healthy relationships. And so, that's what I'm interested in digging in with you.
Yeah. And so your audience are people more like you, right? That are entrepreneurs and achievers. And is it a fitness audience, would you say, or is it?
We have this wide array of listeners, from housewives to business people. Like we've seemed to kind of attract all kinds of. We have, a bunch of, I think about 20% of our listeners are between the ages of 18 and 29 or 30
Oh,
or
really?
something. Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So we're not just, it's not just a business podcast. It really is about, how to, and I like to emphasize like it's, when we talk about something in business or we talk about something in life, you can take the life experience and adapt it to business, or you can take the business experience and adapt it to life. And so there's a big crossover to me. It's one of the things that I've tried to do in my life, whether it's in my intimate relationships, whether it's with family, whether it's friends, business, social, community, is, the whole premise is that it's all, it all works in between one another.
Yeah,
so,
totally. So when you started this, if you don't mind me asking this, I'm just curious. So why did you start the podcast? Because you're already successful. It's not something you have to do. Mm-hmm. Like what inspired that for you?
The idea came in COVID. We were, a little extra time, we were, doing things that we might not normally do. So we got into watching biographies and so we were watching some biographies, of course, of famous people, right? Because,
mm-hmm. They don't make biographies about regular people.
Which is kind of the point, right? So, I was sitting there, and you'll understand this, like as I'm listening, I could feel myself, and I'm a pretty pragmatic guy. I've been, through lots of personal development, over the course of my life. And I found myself sitting there, whether it's Bill Gates, you just name the entrepreneur, or not even the entrepreneurs, but it could be, somebody like The Rock, Taylor Swift, like famous people in movies, Tom Cruise, whatever. And I found myself, as I'm watching some of these biographies, distorting and deleting some of the information, right? Oh, well, they're billionaires, or, well, they got a team, of course they can do that, or, and you just kind of start to make, excuses in your own head. And I'm sitting there going, well, if I'm doing this, so are other people. And because I feel like I have a pretty decent awareness of that stuff. And so then I thought, you know what, wouldn't it be interesting if there was a podcast about people who are grinding it out every single day, that are relatable, that are living the listener's life, not the life that, it's like, they project to be into or don't believe that they can project themselves into. And so how can we bring real live stories from real live people who are out there grinding it every single day? And I mean, you're a perfect example of that. Like, you have your own business, you've developed certain, expertise in an area, and you are, helping people in your business to grow and be better and be healthier. And so how can we, bring those messages to people at the level where they're at? And so that was kind of the premise of the podcast. And then it just kind of developed, and 31 weeks later, like I literally just did a whatever social media post or, whatever I got to do, because I never done that stuff ever before in my life. About. Like, I have no idea what I'm doing, right? Because I had no social media presence. I'm not this guy that's on, like, this was a big stretch for me. Yeah. And so
that's why I asked you that question. I was amazed that you did it, honestly.
Yeah, like, I had zero social footprint. I felt compelled enough that this was an important enough mission that people need other people who they can really relate to. And so that to me was important. And so, 100,000 downloads after 31 episodes, and it's a bit surreal.
You're made for this.
I wouldn't say that. No, you know what? I don't think it's about me. It's not about me, because I really don't. This is the longest I've ever talked on a podcast straight, right? It's like, it is about the guest and about the experience that we draw out, and how our listeners can relate to the real life ongoing experience that's happening today. And to me, that was really important.
Yeah. And that's why people are probably attracted to it too, because so many people, like, I don't do very many podcasts because I like to stay behind the scenes. And so I'm blessed in that way. But part of it, when you get asked to do podcasts, like you asked me, I'm like, yeah. I was like, I can't believe there's a podcast. That's why I asked you, because I'm like, there's got to be a real reason for this. Yeah. He wants to really serve. You don't need to do it, right? But most people are doing it because they want to be seen, right, and heard. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's selfish in a lot of ways. And so the message comes across that way. And then I remember I got invited to be on a really big podcast. And, they asked me what I was selling. And I said, I'm not selling anything. I just want to help people. And they're like, well, that's not how it works. We got to sell something. And then we get 60%, you get 40%. And I was like, so this is the new infomercial? And I was like, I said some choice words, and I just never talked to him again, because that's not the purpose of it to me. But that's fine. But that's not what it was said. That's not the way it was presented to me in the beginning. So, we waste each other's time for no reason. Like, let's help people, or just tell me what it is, and then we can be on the same page. But when you do a podcast, like, if you really want to serve, it comes across differently. And that's what I noticed with you. And that's why I was excited about it.
It's hilarious that you tell that story, because this is how, like, I know jack about podcasts. Like, this is like, for me,
I could tell.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
I'm just kidding.
So no, it's true. So the most difficult piece of all of this has been putting myself out there, because I don't want to do that. That is not me in my nature whatsoever. But I had a guy reach out recently. We're starting to get, I guess, enough traction that people are starting to reach out and go, oh, it'd be good to get on the podcast. And so I had a guy reach out, and he sends me a note, and he's got a book, and he's like, in his note, he says, hey, and of course, like, we'll give you, a kickback on the sale of the book. And I'm like, and I'm texting back, like, I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah,
right.
I didn't either.
Yeah.
That's why I was shocked.
Well, I have a podcast, and I guess I should know it's a thing, right?
Yeah. And nothing wrong with it. It's just, it's different intent.
I'm a business podcast that has no, I have no business plan behind my podcast, which is kind of stupid or pretty funny, actually. Yeah. It's an oxymoron, but I didn't even know that was a thing. And I said to him, I'm like, look, I appreciate the offer, but I don't monetize the podcast. It's like, I'm not selling anything. I don't sell advertising. I won't take any money from somebody's book. It's like, great. If you have a great book, and I read everybody's book that comes on the show, that I'm recommend the book. If if it's an okay book, I'm going to be like, hey, this is a good book, and congratulations. But I won't say, hey, you should buy this book. But if I love it and I sincerely
way to write
feel
a book. And that's it.
Right. Yeah. Hey, good job on the book. And then we'll just talk about what they want to talk about.
Now everybody knows the secret. you got to do it differently now.
But I won't, right? It's like, I just don't feel like, especially at the stage, this is not about I didn't start it to be, like you said, I've got businesses. I make my money operating businesses. That's how I make my money. This is, to me, this is all out of my pocket. So, studio rentals, the cost, the this, the that, the cost of production, all that kind of stuff, because I can't produce it. I don't have time. All that stuff comes out of my pocket. But to me, I look at it and go, well, where else am I going to get 52 high-level, valuable conversations a year for myself? So to me, it's worth my investment, because I'm like live and in person with the people. So I'm really reaping the benefits of just the conversation and the learning. And then I get to go back and, take that learning and, get rubber to the road and make it happen. So,
yeah. And there's nothing wrong to make sure the business, all the entrepreneurs listening know that there's nothing wrong with making money and doing it,
Nope.
But it's the intent behind it that people feel on a subconscious level.
Yeah.
Because when someone's just doing it to be seen and heard, it feels like there's a friction in it. It's not like a flow. It's not like there's an ease to it. It's like and those are ones you kind of listen to and like not really listen to. And there's someone like Joe Rogan who's just started it for fun, right? And he's just hanging out with his friends. And it sounds a lot like what you're doing here. And then it evolved into this, one of the most influential podcasts in the world, and I think that's the thing that's missing behind a lot. People's intent's off. And it's not that they did it like purposely. It's because they just never took the time to decide in advance. So like one of the things that evolved, I do these programs where I take a group of the high level coaching people, right? The Platinum Partners and Tony Robbins program.
Yep.
And really it started as an experiment. And so we would do these 6-month programs and we would measure everything. We'd do their lab work and everything. And then we would track everything because there's an app. And then that we would see like, okay, who followed through, who didn't, who actually made progress and who didn't, and what's the differences. So at the end of the 6 months, we have a group of my friends who are all geniuses, and they would create kind of like a little mini AI, but this is like before I even knew what AI was.
Right.
And they would connect all the dots. Like, what are all the differences? What are the patterns? What are the similarities? And then we'd sit down, they would explain them to me, and I would ask a bunch of questions. Then me and Tony would talk. And then we would say like, hey, look at these differences. Like let's change something for the next time, one thing, and then run another group through it. And then there's still people from the other group that are just carrying on. Like I have a handful of clients that are coming up on 2,000 log training sessions with me. Like not with me, they do it on their own. But that's a ton, right? Like the consistency in saying you're going to do something and do it is where people fall short. Like everyone's chasing like, hey, like with biohacking now, like, oh, what's the biohacking thing? It's exciting. So there's a book I read a long time ago by an Aikido master, George Leonard, great writer. And the book was called Mastery. So it appealed to me. And he identified different types of people. And you can be a different type of person in different areas of your life. And so you'll totally understand this because you've heard something like this before. I've modified it for the people that I serve. And the first type of person is the dabbler, right? The dabbler is driven by feeling. And so if it feels good, they keep doing it. But as soon as it gets tough, where it's not smooth, now they have some friction and they just bolt. So they'll either make up an excuse, they'll tell a story of why it's not for them or why it doesn't work. And they'll go to the next new shiny object. And that's most of the world. Most of the world are dabblers. And if you're a dabbler, you're going to suffer because your feelings aren't real in a lot of ways, right? Because if you're in fear exaggerates things. It creates an illusion, which is very important if you're in fight or flight, you need to survive. But most of the time we're not. We live in a pretty civilized, safe world. And so, but fear exaggerates and produces a distorted reality. So it's giving you information that isn't real. It's big and scary. And so when that happens, we have bad information, we make bad decisions, leads to regret. So the dabbler is most of the world. That's everybody in January when they go to the gym, right? Everybody. Like,
when you go in, the month the gym is full.
The one that are going to be there in December the following year are those same people that they were in last December, right? Because they're not dabblers, right? And then the second group of people is a large chunk. Most of the people I start with are in this category. And they are the committed achiever. And that sounds really beautiful, but everything has an overdose and everything has an underdose. Mastery is found in the middle. You probably heard, like in Tibetan culture, they have something called the middle way. And the middle way is when you have access to all your resources, all your capabilities, all your skills. Now, the committed achiever is driven by action. They're driven by doing. So when everything's going good, what does a committed achiever do? They do more. That's what they do. They do more of it because they think more is better. That's not true though. Then they start to overdo it. But then when things aren't going their way, what's their solution? Action. They do more. So their answer to everything is doing more. But then you have that phrase, all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And so you start doing. You're busy, but you're not productive. You're not making progress because you're just doing. Now, the highest level, and if you were to look at this through the lens of Carl Jung's archetypes works, where you have like the warrior, the magician, the king or queen, like those different personalities people have, different parts of a person. The warrior is the committed achiever. That's the one that goes to battle and says, just tell me what to do and I'll do it. I'll work till my eyes bleed, right? Some crazy shit. And I did that most of my life.
And you go through those phases.
I'm not going to point out you did, but that's why we're friends.
I did do that. 100%.
Right. And so when people are in that group, like they paid a lot of money, they invested a lot. And the pattern that we noticed is they're at this committed achiever stage and they're exhausted. And they're like, I can't give anymore. Or they're there and they've gotten a level of success and they're like, I can't keep this up. This is exhausting. Because where does a committed achiever come from? It says, I'm not enough unless I check all these boxes. I need to make this much money. I need to have this kind of house. I need to have this kind of spouse. I need to have this, all these things that don't mean anything. We just made them up, but we did it unconsciously. And so the committed achiever is living by these rules that like, hey, I'm only worthy of life's rewards if I have a six pack, if I weigh this much, if it's like all these random things. But the truth is they're not happy when they get there. And so they'll hit a goal. And the committed achiever, when they hit a goal, they're like, yes. And what do they do? Yep. And they set another goal. Right. And then they do, they're always,
but they need a goal in order to feel good. They need to be accomplishing a goal in order to feel good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they achieve to be happy instead of happily achieve. Those are two different worlds. So the evolution is you go from this warrior, this committed achiever, to the magician, where the magician is a whole other thing. It's not commitment, it's something else. And I'll explain that in a second, but understand, this is the part that I want the audience to understand, is that you ask different questions. The Dabbler asks a question like, hey, what's fun? What can we do? Right? Like they just want to chase pleasure. They're chasing that sensation of pleasure. And so they're not going to do anything that's difficult. And the only way you get better is by doing difficult things. That's where you attain a level of wisdom. Like knowledge is everywhere. You can get knowledge anywhere, right? But you don't get it from a podcast, right? You don't get it from a book. You don't get it from a classroom. You don't get it from a seminar. You get it by taking the knowledge and put it into action, having a problem and having them collide and then gleaning the lessons from that. And then when you do that, there's a vote that takes place and your subconscious like, hey, you're the type of person that kicks ass when there's a problem. You're the type of person, and you start to tell this story. We become the stories we tell ourselves, tells others, and the stories we believe. And we start to believe stories because of repetition again and again and again. So like, how did history get passed down for so long? It's because someone sat down and told a story. That's how it all costs. So if you want to get someone's attention, you tell them a story because everyone's interested. You can get a kid interested in a story. And kids now, they're like all over the place, because they're trained with these iPads and stuff. But you tell them a story, they lock in. It tells you something. It's something primal. And so the question the committed achiever would ask is, like I said before, is like, what do I need to do, right? Just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And I'll hammer it out and I have to suffer. And if I suffer and I achieve the goal, then I'm worthy of life's rewards. When you evolve, you go to the magician. The magician would say, how can I get 10 times the result in half the time and enjoy it and hook up all my friends in the process? That's like a big time question, right? And it's a fun question because it's exciting. You're like, wow, that sounds almost impossible. Let's see if we can do that. And if you do 1/10 of that, it's still way better than a committed achiever. Plus you're enjoying it as you go through it. And when you enjoy it, you don't have to grind because the grind is a state of mind. The grind is the committed achiever. The committed achiever grinds. It's like, I got to suffer and do this. I got to work hard. I'm not going to sleep. I'm not going to eat. I'm going to do all these things. I'm
going to suffer.
Right. I have to suffer in order to be worthy. Yeah. That's what it is. But the truth is when you really find someone that is hyper successful, not just successful. Because you can grind and become successful. Hyper successful is different. Like if you ask Elon Musk, that guy doesn't have hobbies. That guy doesn't go to watch sports. That guy lives and breathes creating a vision and learning and applying and gaining wisdom and bringing things together and doing the impossible. That's who he is. That's his identity. And so we have to go to this higher level, beyond the dabbler, beyond the committed achiever, that warrior, go to the magician, which is the devoted and humble student of self-mastery. And every one of those words matter, because devotion is different than commitment. Devotion is usually used in spiritual circles, right? You're devoted to God, to the higher presence, to a higher power. And really devotion is, I'm not like commitment, like in a relationship, it's the best way to understand it because everyone gets this. When I was a kid, across the street were my godparents, who I didn't really know that well. And they were married forever and they fought like insanely. Like their house wasn't even close to mine. We could hear them yelling at each other. And I remember they would always say like, I'm still here, ain't I? That was the thing they said because they were committed. To them, commitment was being there. Devotion is being there and giving your best while you're there, not just showing up and being a dickhead, showing up and coming from the heart and saying like, hey, I'm here to serve. I'm here to give. I didn't come to this relationship just to take. I came here to be my best and give my best. And hopefully that's enough, right? And if it's not, that's when you know it's time to go. But that's devotion over commitment. Commitment is fine, but you got to suffer. And so devotion is like, I'm not only going to go on this adventure of life. You set a goal, you have a vision, you say, I'm devoted to it. And I'm going to enjoy it each day. And if I'm not enjoying it, I need to recalibrate and see what I'm doing and step back and observe myself and say, hey, what am I focused on now? What story am I telling that's making this suck? Because I'm creating it, obviously, right? And so that's that devoted and humble. Humble is being open-minded. One of the things I've really noticed in these groups is these people are already successful in some area of their life. And they like that because everyone kind of bends to them. Like, so what I mean by that is if you're the boss, you run a company, like it's your call. You can fire people. People have a low level of fear from you, even if you're a really kind boss, right? Because ultimately their livelihood's tied to this. And so what happens is this person that's the boss isn't used to having to play another role in their life. And so when they start something new, they suck at it because when we don't do something, you're not very good at it, right? We know that, but when you're in that stage, a lot of times it's unconscious. So they don't want to do new things. So when they're not taking care of their health and not doing resistance training or eating good and they're drinking and they enroll in a program with me, I got to get them to beginner's mind because if they're not there, they're not going to do it. And some people sign up, they pay me thousands of dollars and I never hear a peep from them. They just disappear. They're embarrassed. And they're bound to run into me again. You know what I mean? Like, I love it when it happens. I was like, I remember you. You ghosted me, man.
You're the guy that dropped a bunch of money and I never saw him again.
Yeah, now you're going to die about 20 years earlier. That's sad. You know, that's not intelligent. It's just fear. That's all it is. Fear they're not enough. So they're like, hey, I'm going to put my energy over here because I feel like my needs are being met here. I feel better when I'm over here. But if you always chase what feels better, you're always going to be disappointed because challenge creates change. And so it's called hormesis in biology. Hormesis is like right now with podcasts and everything, here's one of the things how you know someone's full of shit is they will use a word like that you've learned in introductory biology or something, and then they will talk all about it. But what does positioning wise, the listener hasn't heard that word. So now they're positioning themselves as they're higher, right? I'm an expert. Experts are full of shit from what I can tell. Like if someone calls me an expert, I can tell you that I am not an expert. I put a lot of time in things, but I don't know everything, but I will find the person that knows that thing. So I have like when I do lab work, I have like 13, what I call geniuses that are friends of mine. They do lab work on their own and we all share it anonymously. We take the clients' names off it or the patient's names off of it. And then we all blindly look at it without interacting. And then we all share it. And it's like a mastermind group in a way, I guess you could call it, but it's just friends trying to help people. Right. And then we can see it. And when, you have like someone in a completely different field, like me, right? Like I focus on performance, you know, and someone that's working on saving someone's life, like a real doctor, right? And they give me their perspective. They're looking at it through a completely different lens. And I learned so much from it. And then when I'm looking at like some adrenal test, like a saliva cortisol test, which is measuring the circadian rhythm, and I'm looking at it for performance. I'm like, hey, when is the best time for them? Like if they have to perform at an event this time of day, what can we do to make sure they're optimized, right? Like, and so those are like little things that they wouldn't consider because it's not important in their world, but they're sharing things with me that are very important to everyone I work with. And so I want that. And I don't want to make a mistake. To think that I know everything when I look at a lab test is crazy.
Do you do that is that done within one of your suppliers? Or you're like, how did you get into a group like that? Because it's one of the things that we've talked about on the podcast in the past, and I'm a big proponent of, is getting into mastermind groups or getting into industry specific groups to help so that you get a different perspective. And you just actually like laid it out really well. What's good, what a doctor might look at is irrelevant. Like in some of the data is irrelevant to them, but it's crucially important to you and you get the benefit of it. It's an interesting strategy. Like how'd you get into that?
It just kind of happened, honestly. It wasn't something I strategically did. Like back in the day when I had training centers, I wanted to create like a medical referral board, right? Because a lot of our clients were doctors. And so I went around and I learned more about the medical field than I could have from any book or any class. And what happened is I was like, hey, here's some MRIs, here's some x-rays. Just tell me what you see in it. I just wanted to see what these people are. So I went to 58 different doctors, shared this. They all found something wrong with it because that's what they're trained to do. They were mine. I have no symptoms. I have no pain. There's nothing wrong with me. Those were from a healthy person with no symptoms. But they looked at it and some recommended surgery. Someone recommended crazy things to me. And I'm like, and in that moment, before I just believed doctors, because in my mind, they were positioned at a certain, they're people. Right. And so when you start training them and you get to know like all the challenges they have too, they're people. And then like sometimes one of their patients dies and it hurts them and they're not getting help. They're not talking to anyone about it. And so like, it's like with law enforcement, like I had someone that worked for me. He was going into fire rescue. He got in really great shape. And he was just the nicest kid, like a sweet kid, just like nicest guy, doesn't have like a bad bone in his body. And I saw him, he got in the fire rescue. So they're like first on scene at accidents and stuff. Right. And so what happened was I saw him like 6 months, I would say. It was only 6 months of him working. And I didn't recognize him because he saw things that people just shouldn't have to see. And if you do see it, you need to get some sort of help with it probably. Right. And so I think a lot of times people don't realize that everything comes down to, it's not about the strategy. Strategies are important, but you only need two things to achieve anything in life. You need an effective plan that you can sustain. So there's a lot of plans that work, like fasting and cleanses and detoxes, right? Those just make you, a lot of that's water weight, but it's a calorie deficit, so you lose weight. But they're not really removing toxins the way they say. You need to eat in a way and live in a way where your body has the resources to remove toxins just on a regular basis. What is a 7-day detox do when there's 365 days in a year, right? Yeah. Like these are silly things humans do, but it's the dabbler. The dabbler comes through because they just want a shortcut and they feel bad about themselves. And if they start something, they have a shiny object, they'll do that and the pressure comes off them for a little bit, but it's going to come right back. And that's why people start diets and stop diets. You need to eat in a way that you can sustain. If you can't sustain it, there's no purpose to it. You're just going up and down. And what a lot of people don't realize, when you talk about yo-yo dieting, it's like you starve yourself and you lose weight. For every 10 pounds you lose like that, about half of it's come from lean body mass. Now some people are like, well, I just want to lose the weight. No. There's different things. There's different reasons. Muscle, lean body mass is one of the most important things to live longer and live stronger. When I say that, I mean like health span. Like you can live 100 years, but if you're bedridden the whole time, who wants to do that? If you have someone coming and changing your diaper, like a nurse that you don't even know that goes on shifts and just some stranger comes in and wipes your ass for you, that's a real thing. And it's sad. And no one needs that. People lose their dignity like that. It's people that have been so strong and served and we're just great people. And then now at this stage of life, they're suffering and they just want to die. That's what happened to my mom. Like she just wanted to die because she was like ashamed of herself, she told me. And that's heartbreaking to me because she's just a great human being. And that's all avoidable. And it's avoidable because muscle is what gives you strength. Muscle is where, if people will get excited about this, is where we burn fat. You take a full fat cell, release the fatty acids in the mitochondria muscle, and then you turn it into glucose and you use it for fuel. That's what fat burning is, right? So if you lose muscle, you have a greater ability to store fat. And so people don't realize it. They're just going by the scale. The scale's not telling you anything. The scale's just telling you a big number of everything. Some of it's going to be water. Some of it's going to be hopefully not muscle, but usually it's muscle and fat. But we have to look at those things. Like we need to look at what's real. And whenever you do a diet and you lose 10 pounds of weight and then half of it's muscle, let's just say, and then you eventually you can't stick to it because it's not sustainable. Your body will fight back. It needs to survive. Your willpower is not going to stop that. Right. And so you gain the weight back. Most people gain more than that back. And so what do they gain back? Do they gain back muscle? No. They just lost 5 pounds of muscle and gained 10 pounds of fat. That's what they did. And then that adds up year after year after year. There's a study, like in one of the first training courses I took when I was like 24. I think this was like 1999 or something. One of my instructors, he told me about this study, and it was with women from the age of 20 to 40. And what they did was they measured their body composition. So not just their weight, but their muscle and fat ratio, right? And then when they came back 20 years later for their 20-year reunion or whatever it was, they measured them again. Now, the number on the scale showed a 10-pound increase on average. So people are like, hey, that's not bad. It's like a half a pound a year. That could creep up on you. No big deal, right? If you gain a half pound a year. So the scale is just saying, hey, it's not so bad. But when they measured their body composition, they lost 20 pounds of muscle and gained 30 pounds of fat. That, if you put people that before and after on that, that's insane. That's a dramatic transformation, but in the wrong direction, right?
Well, and then compound that out to their 60s or 70s, and now all of a sudden you've got a person that,
and after 50, it seems to accelerate too. Right. Like you really start to lose lean body mass. So, like, just how do you reverse that? Well, challenge creates change. If you don't use it, you lose it. So we'll use it in the simplest terms. So if I don't challenge my biceps and I just go through life, they're going to get weaker. They're going to atrophy. They're going to break down. And so that's what we call aging. Aging is not a real thing to me. It's a lifestyle thing. Like I make it a point to go out and find old people that kick ass and do extraordinary things. So I always share it with clients to change their belief, because people have subconscious beliefs about aging, sickness, and death, and they're terrified to think about it. But those are the beliefs we have to look at. Those are the beliefs we have to evolve, because as they evolve, if we look forward to aging and think about this. So this is really cool. When I was 13 years old, I was at Giant Eagle grocery store with my mom, and we had the checkout, and there was Muscle and Fitness magazine. This guy, Sean Ray, was on the cover. I remember it that clearly. And I just opened it up in the back, and there's a picture of this guy, and he's flexing. Another picture, he's running a sprint. And he's Bob Del Montague. At the time, it says age 78. And he was ripped. And in my mind, I was like, I had no clue that was real. I didn't know that was possible. And it changed my beliefs about aging. I'm like, my goal is to be a Jack Santa Claus when I get older, because I'm like, this guy, like if this guy is in this shape when he's 78, when he was 84, he was even better shape. Like, so it blew my mind. And he's not alone. There's a lot of people that do this. But if you're in shape when you're 40, that's good, but it's not that big of a deal, right? If you're in shape when you're 80 or even 70 or 65, your word carries weight. You have influence. So there's a guy, he's from India. I think last time I checked, he was 111 and he was running marathons. He had all these world records, and he didn't start running until he was 80 something because his wife passed away and he just needed something. That was like his way to grieve.
Cope and deal with it.
Yeah. And so it's like, there's a huge opportunity as we age to, if you take care of yourself, to inspire people and really serve on a higher level. Like if you can do, like I created this whole system for clients. It's really interesting because I would keep track of everyone's stats, because I call it the spider's web. So if you were to envision in your mind, like say across the door frame, a spider's web, and it's symmetrical, right? And say the sun's hitting it just so you can see the whole thing, but it's all connected. So if I reached across and broke one of them, the whole thing shifts, right? And our fascia that connects everything in our body is like a spider's web. A lot of times people fall in love with certain exercises, right? Like girls will do a lot of lower body and abs, but they won't do a lot of upper body, which creates an imbalance. And then they'll have neck pain and they're not sure why. Well, because their neck is weak compared to the rest of their body. You have this pulling effect because it's all connected. And so I created this, I have all this data. And so what we figured out is like, okay, if someone can do a plank, I'll just use really simple ones, a plank for 2 minutes, but they can't do a side plank on each side for a minute, they're going to have back pain. They're more likely to have back pain, I should say. It's like 44% or something like that from our data. But it's all these little things. And the first thing is to be able to do it with your body weight. So level 1 of this spider's web structural balance system that I created is understanding like, hey, if you can't do a full push-up and you can't do a full squat, you can't do a lunge down to the ground and control it with balance, you need to take care of that before you go in the gym and start throwing your bunch of weight on anything.
Right.
Because you're reinforcing those imbalances. And so now you'll have a really strong, you have like a Kevlar spider's web that's turned to one side, right? And so it's not something to be afraid of. It's something to understand. And as you train, it's not about this long-term goal. It's about, hey, today, what do I do today? And so how do we progress? Like we need to measure things, but people don't really measure things. They'll wear all these biohacking devices. I'm sorry, most of those aren't accurate. So if you want to look at the studies on that, they're still figuring that out. They're selling your data. That's what they're doing. And you're paying for it. And so, but it's fun. It's exciting. I use some of them because I just like to measure stuff. But when I compare it to other things that are known to work, they're not very good. And so but if you wake up and look at it, like I had a client, super smart, genius, in fact, I think. He would wake up and look at his device and then decide how he felt. And I was like, hey, brother, why don't you just, when you wake up, decide how you feel, and then look at this later.
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
And then that's all he did. But it was happening when he was first waking up, so he wasn't really cognizant of it, right? It was just like a habit. And he's like, oh yeah, I don't even know why I did it. I just picked it up unconsciously.
Yeah, no, it's funny because I got an Apple Watch and so, if I wear it in the sleep and whatever, but it's like, I already know how I slept. Yeah. Like I woke up, I know how I slept. Like it doesn't really give me that much information. And I want to actually, I do want to go back because I mean, you honed in on a couple of things that I think are kind of critical, and I'd love for you to expand on it a little bit. And I have a few questions around it for the listener, because, even before we get into the physical fitness style and all the intelligence that you have and experience around that stuff, the dabbler, the committed achiever, and the magician, like to me, it's like it's really important for our audience to kind of understand. And I have a belief where it's like, hey, where am I? Where would I like to be? And how do I bridge that gap? What are some of the techniques? What are some of the strategies? What are some of the questions I need to ask myself? Where can I go to get the research? All that kind of stuff. And it's like, so the dabbler, like, I've been making feverish notes here as you've been talking, but, the dabblers, ends up suffering because they stay in the state. I'd love to, if you could just kind of give some thoughts to, hey, what would I see in myself if I was a dabbler, if I was a committed achiever, or if I was a magician? And I think sometimes, and this is as much for the audience as it is and the listener than it is really for you, but it's inside the conversation. It's so often, I've done this a million times, I think I'm a magician when I'm actually a committed achiever. I might slide up to magician maybe 1 to 5% of the time, but really I kind of live the bulk of my time in the committed achiever, or vice versa. It could be dabbler up to committed achiever, because I just really feel like I want the listener to understand, hey, where are you? Where do you slide in between the two? And how, what techniques could you use to get yourself to the next? And actually, this will be another question, but can you skip from dabbler to magician? Or is it one of those things where you have to go through the process and live the lived experience in order to kind of get there? And I'm curious on your feedback.
Yeah, those are great questions. I'm glad you brought up, because I didn't finish that part. But the highest level, that magician, is the devoted and humble student of self-mastery. And self-mastery is really the answer to everything. Because why do you do what you do? That's the real question we have to know and understand. Like let's start here. There are 3 prerequisites people need in order to change anything. These are like, you have to have these 3 things. And when I share them, you're like, of course, because you naturally have them, because you worked on them. Not naturally, you developed them, you honed them. But the first one is self-awareness. And self-awareness does not get enough, just enough love, I would say, because you don't know what you don't know. And we've all met somebody that is just going through life thinking one thing, and everyone around is like, hey, no one's saying anything to them. I'm the friend that tells them. And they usually get pissed, but now they expect it at this point. But my friends are very self-aware, so I don't usually have to do it. But sometimes I meet somebody and I have to tell them, like, hey, I know you have good intentions, but did you notice this?
Yeah.
And this could be called mindfulness. Ellen Langer from Harvard, she started at Yale. She's one of the legendary pioneer of mind-body research. If you get her on here, I would get her on here. She's incredible. And I won't spoil her content because I can recite it to you, all of it verbatim. But she's the one who came up with the term mindfulness back in the 70s. And mindfulness is noticing new things. That's how she defines it, which is fascinating. So like if you drive the same way to work every day, you go into your house, everything, mindfulness would be like, what's different here? That would be mindfulness, because after a while we just go in autopilot and we're unaware of things. And so like when someone's in their house, you can sneak up on them and scare the bejesus out of them, right? If they're in a new environment, much more difficult because they're more mindful, they're more aware. There's a low level degree of fear of like, hey, this is not familiar territory for me. There's things around here that I'm not usually around. And that's that primal mind, that reptilian mind, whatever you want to call it, the survival mind. Mm-hmm. And so that's self-awareness. The second thing is self-honesty. When self-honesty is interesting because a lot of people say they're honest, but they're not. They exaggerate. And I used to do this because I'm very optimistic at times. And as you evolve, you're like, hey, if I call everyone amazing, everyone awesome, it's kind of watered down, right? It's just kind of annoying. It just sounds like I'm just saying things and I don't really mean it, right?
Right.
But if I say things accurately, like, hey, I'm proud of you, but I don't say it every day, but I say it when it matters, like that has power to it. But you want to be thoughtful, you want to be mindful, but you also want to have this self-honesty where you're not just saying things, you're not just doing things. You understand why you're doing them. So a lot of times we're doing things like someone says, like I binge every night when I eat, right? And I'm like, well, why do you think that is? And they're like, and they'll create this whole story. And then everyone listening knows like, hey, that's just a story, buddy. But what it is like, hey, you're following a plan that does not work. You're not eating enough food. So when the sun goes down, less light enters the eye. The pineal gland notices this and say, hey, sun's going down. We don't eat at night. That's not how humans evolve. And so what that does sends a message like eat or you're going to die. So you can't override everything forever. You can do that for a little bit though. So you're going to have cravings at night. Or you're doing it to soothe yourself, and that's what it usually is. They're not honest about it. They had a rough day at work. They don't have coping mechanisms. Maybe they don't exercise, train, or they're just pushing. And so they're in a state of fear. We'll call it stress though, right? Because it makes people feel better. That's what the committed achiever calls it. Stress, not fear.
Right.
It's fear.
Yep.
And so what happens is they're soothing themselves. They're soothing their emotions with food. And that isn't going to get them to their goal if they want to be fitter, because they're going to be eating foods generally that aren't healthy for them and ones that they eat too much of. Nothing wrong with eating a little bit of things, but that's the reason behind it. So they're not honest with themselves of why they're doing it. Instead, they're creating this whole story about why it's happening. So, it's just, I got a lot of stress. Well, stress is fear. Well, you can cope with fear a lot of different ways. Stuffing your face every night, drinking a bottle of wine is not one of the best ways to do it. It's not in line with your goals. Now, if you don't care, that's not a goal, then do whatever the heck you want, right? So if we go back to self-awareness, self-honesty, the third one is a big one, and the world lacks it incredibly right now. It's personal responsibility, 100% personally responsible for everything in your life. It may not be your fault, but it's your responsibility to deal with it. And when people blame, they are not taking responsibility. When people complain, blame, when they criticize themselves and others, that is destructive activity. And that's got to be a standard. So the number one belief that I teach clients. I call it lion law number one. Lion, when I say lion, I mean your highest and best self, who God made you to be, your highest, fullest potential. That's what I'm saying when I say lion. And the way you know there is you're in some sort of love-based emotional states, because your feelings are feedback. It's telling you, what story are you telling? If you're telling a disempowering story, a story of fear, you're going to create fear-based emotions. If you're telling an empowering story, a story of truth, one that creates and generates energy and creates value in the world, then you're going to be in some sort of love-based emotional states. But that's just feedback. There's nothing wrong with it. So that's the lion. The lamb is the fear-based emotion. So that's the quick version of what I teach. But everyone at any point has this choice of going to the lion or the lamb. So you can go into fear, and every mistake anyone's ever made came from a place of fear. They felt like they weren't enough. They felt stressed. They didn't have enough time. There's scarcity. They were sad. They were depressed. They were playing the victim. They were the saboteur. Since they didn't feel like they're enough, they did something to sabotage themselves, right? Just did silly things. And we've all been there, but we all have these different parts of us. So the way we really decide is we have to have the beliefs, the software that runs in our mind that puts us in love-based emotional states, because that's constructive energy. That's productive energy. So when you're in love-based emotional states, no one's ever been in a state of joy and said, I'm exhausted. No one's ever been in a state of appreciation and says, I'm so tired. Because love-based emotions generate more energy than they utilize. Fear-based emotions are like lighter fluid. They may be powerful, but they just drag you, crash afterwards. They use more energy than they give you. And so the emotions are a really great tool, a feedback tool. So we have these 3 prerequisites that we talked about, but then there's the lion law number one is I absolutely and utterly, and the wording is important here, I absolutely and utterly refuse every story of limitation that I use to rationalize and justify being less than I am.
Can you say that again for the audience too? I want to capture it myself.
Yep. I absolutely and utterly refuse every story of limitation that I use to rationalize and justify being less than I am. And that's where that self-honesty is. The human brain makes us right, but it's not the brain, it's the ego. It's the fear-based self. It's that lamb that has to be right. So it will justify your behavior. Even when you do something you know you're wrong, you'll make up a story to make you feel better, and you're going to make the other person, you're going to become the victim, and then blame the person. We've all heard this. This is prevalent in the world right now. And it's always been there. It's just with the internet and everything, I think it's more obvious, and people are less tolerant of it. So when someone does it, people are like, look at this, and they point it out.
Yeah, but and even if it's not against someone else, it at least helps make you feel better in the moment, and which can be destructive, like from a. And I mean, it's interesting because you talked about emotions and you talked about joy, and then you talked about a disempowering emotion. I mean, the human experience can't experience more than one emotion at any given time. So you either feeling joy or you're feeling depressed, and if you are flipping back and forth, make no mistake, it's happening as a switch almost. And not, I love this piece of your, the 1, 2, 3, the self-awareness, the self-honesty, and the personal responsibility. I really love the personal responsibility. And I can't recall hearing these 3 as they've been stated. And then how do you use those 3 tools maybe this is a very pragmatic approach to it, but how do you use those 3 tools from a consciousness state where you're like, hey, I really want to improve in one area, whether maybe it's physical fitness, right? You actually brought up I think something that happens a lot in the world today is people get into this state of, and whether it's fearfulness, stress, depression, and they binge eat at night. So if we use that example, how would you use these 3 steps in order to be able to create a process for the listener to think about where they can go, okay, maybe I'll stop binge eating if we just use that experience?
Yeah, so we do the things we do because of the stories we tell, and we're playing that character in that story. So it's our identity. So when I talk about being a lion, that's your highest and best self, your fullest potential. So with those steps would be like the committed achiever way of doing it, right? Step 1, step 2, step 3. That's very strategic, right?
And that's the reason why I asked that question was
good.
because that's where most of our listeners are at. So that's where it's like, you know, because that was, to me, it was like, okay, this is where they can relate.
And so at first there, you have to have a level of awareness. If you don't have a level of awareness, you're just not going to do it, and you won't even know why you're not doing it, right? So if someone's even aware of this, they're not dabbling, right? The dabbler doesn't know. They're blaming everybody, right? The committed achiever will have these, can go back and forth based if they're in the lion or the lamb. Are they in fear-based emotion states or love-based emotion states? Because only truth can be spoken in a state of love. Because fear distorts reality. It distorts information. It creates an illusion. It makes things way scarier than they are, right? When we're in fear. And so it's state of being that matters most. So your consciousness level. Now, it's the best way to learn it, I believe, is through first person, third person. So whenever you think of it this way, so if there was a lion right here that hasn't eaten in a long time, and its face was pressed up against yours, you could feel hot breath and the saliva dripping off its fangs, and you could smell like rotting flesh stuck between its teeth, you would be soiling your shorts, right? Everyone, you should, because that is real fear.
If you're not, you're not right.
But you're looking at it through your eyes. That's first person. That will put you in fight or flight. Now, third person is the higher self. It's the observer. The observer has power because they have the power of perception. Say you're up in a helicopter now, looking down at this thing happening, of this version of you with this lion about to maul you. You can sit back and like, hey, let's lower the helicopter. Let's create a diversion, right? You can think strategically. You can take effective and intelligent action. When you're in fear, you either fight or flight. So again, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. When we're in fear, we tend to do one or two of the same things. We either face it, maybe we overreact and we yell and we're angry, or we go hide. We just avoid it, like we avoid conflict, right? And that's a common thing. But when you go to the observer, the higher self, you can distance yourself, even though the threat's still there, the situation's still there, and go to that observer. And so when you go to those 3 prerequisites of self-awareness, self-honesty, personal responsibility, that's a state of being. That has to become part of you. And the way it becomes part of you is through focused repetition. And so you have to have a vision for yourself. I call this the North Star process, because before there was GPS, if you were lost at sea, you were lost at night in the forest, you found North Star, Polaris, and you knew which way to go home, right? That served as that guiding light. But most people haven't taken the time, invested the time to decide who they want to be, how they want to show up, what they want to create, and why they're doing all this. Like, you need a higher purpose. So I'll give you an example with clients. Like, whenever I first meet with them, these are super smart people, super hardworking people. They're some of the best people on the planet, in my opinion. I love these people. But when I ask them, like, hey, you just enrolled in a program, and I put a deadline on it, right? Like, hey, it starts this day and ends this day. I decide these things for you. You don't have to decide them. This is how we do this, right? And that there's a reason for that psychologically, because they're like, hey, I can't put this off. I got to start on this day,
right? And
they want to do that, so it serves them. But we need to do that for ourselves, right? And that's what I always try to teach people, and that's self-mastery. Self-mastery is mastery of the only 3 things that matter, the 3 pillars of creation: your thoughts, emotions, and actions. That's the Holy Trinity. That's the trilogy. If you don't master those, life is happening to you, not for you. It may happen for you sometimes, but it's by accident. It's random. It's not by design. We must be deliberate in our creation. We must be conscious in our creation. And you do that by deciding in advance. So with the North Star process, I'll give you like the abbreviated version. Like, think VIP, right? V is vision. So you want a vision for long term. Like, if it's with your body, like, hey, say you just woke up, you're 100 years old. Tell me what you experience. And say, like, I stand up with powerful posture. I feel strength coursing through my veins and joy in my heart, gratitude for this opportunity to live this day, to serve, to create, to be. And then I'm able to run sprints. I can swim. I can climb trees. I can do 15 explosive push-ups and pop up on my feet. Like, you start telling this story. And if you keep doing that, you're going to start doing the things each day. So you ask yourself, like, what do I need to do today to get there? Like, I can do that right now, but I will make sure I sustain it, because here's the truth. Every day you get a little better or you get a little worse,
Right.
but it's micro changes, right? And it can get heavy. It's like the study I told you, we only gained a half a pound a year on the scale, but it added up in a way that was detrimental to their health and their lifespan even. And so we want to have this, we have to realize that the truth is we get a little better, we get a little worse every day. You get a little sicker each day, or you get a little healthier. You get a little stronger, you get a little weaker. And that's not something to be bummed about. It's something to be excited about, because today's the day.
Yeah, you get the opportunity to move yourself forward.
Every day is a game. It's game time. But there's 3 beliefs I really think will help listeners. I think it's helped me a lot. And if you've mastered these 3 beliefs, and I say master, to be aware of them, honest about them, and own them, and make them what you want. So have a North Star for them. And so well, let me go back to the VIP so I don't forget that.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
I get carried away. So you have that vision for long-term, but you need the next milestone for like 3 months from now. Like, because if it's too far away, you're just going to put it off. Like, I got plenty of time, right? So what's that 3-month milestone? That should be not an outcome goal, should be a process goal. So for clients, we train 6 times a week. We train briefly, but intensely, and we know how to adjust. So if your ability to recover, your sleep's off or something, how do you adjust so you don't overtrain? So we have this whole system for it now. And so 6 sessions times that number of weeks, right? That's the process goal. And then you cut a little bit off. So say take 5 times the number of weeks. So if it's 12 weeks, it's 60 sessions, because you don't want to have to be perfect. You can be optimal, but not perfect, because perfect isn't real.
Right.
And when you focus on being a perfectionist, you are always disappointed, because I have to be 100% win all the time.
Yeah, it's unachievable.
80% is greater than 100%. So if you aim for 80% and you do 81%, it's awesome. If you aim for 100% and you do 99%, it's a failure. So we set up these rules for ourselves, which make it impossible to feel good most of the time, right? And if you don't feel good, you tend to do bad things. I remember George St. Pierre said this, being in practice. He said it was the best quote I ever heard. He just got a haircut and he got new trunks and stuff. And he kind of bouncing around. He was really happy. It was just funny to see this. And he said, when you look good, you feel good. And when you feel good, you do good. And I was like, there's some wisdom in that. Right? Yeah.
Very true.
And so you want that vision and that next milestone. So the long-term vision, it needs to be I would say at least 7 years and further out. Like it's believed that every cell in your entire body, including your skeleton, is renewed every 7 years. Some say it's faster, but no one says it's longer than that. And so that 7 years, also in ancient teachings, that's a cycle. So you have 7 days in a week. You have 7 year cycles of complete renewal. So you would plan your life in these 7 year cycles. And it's long enough where it's like, oh, I can do this. But it's not long enough to where you want to put it off, because years go by pretty quick. Usually after the first year, you look and like, hey, that was a whole year. I didn't make much progress. Let me get back on it. And so that vision is the first part, with that next milestone too. And then let's go to the P. It's purpose. So most people train and exercise or diet or whatever because they don't feel like they're enough. So the whole fitness industry is screwed because their premise for it is flawed. But if I want to sell dumb shit to people, this is how you do it. You make them feel like they're not enough. You create a state of inadequacy, a state of insecurity, a state of fear, and then you can control them. You can get them to buy things that, if you logically ask them, they would know that it's not going to work. Like the thing where they shock your muscles and say you get a 6-pack, right? Like that's absurd.
Yeah.
No, everybody knows that.
The stem, whatever they're called.
Yeah. So stem is good for rehabilitation and stuff like that, but it doesn't burn fat. That doesn't make any sense. If someone believes that, they don't understand how the human body works. And but I understand why they bought it, because they were made promises, and the things on screens we tend to believe for some reason. It's just I think a programming thing. And so what we want to do is we want to make sure that our purpose is bigger than our body. And what I mean by that, so so I work with Tony Robbins. I think everybody knows that, but it's
not everybody.
Now they do.
Yeah, now they do.
But he's one of my best friends. I live next to him. I go everywhere with him, right? And so I started traveling with him everywhere, probably like a decade ago. And before that, I owned gyms. I traveled the world, gave seminars, but I was kind of like, I was my boss, right? Now, when I'm helping him, I'm supporting him. I'm doing whatever he needs to get done. And I do that fully and I do it joyfully. And I love that guy and I believe in everything he does. But when I first started traveling, we're going on trips for like 6 weeks and I don't have anyone helping me. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how this works. So I'm finding out as we go along and all of a sudden we might have a meeting somewhere else. Now we're on a plane flying somewhere else. And I'm like missing workouts or I'm doing half-assed workouts. I don't know where I'm getting food because we keep moving places. And
dude, I remember those days.
Yeah, that was rough. That's when I worked with you too. I was trying to figure it out then.
That's right.
Yeah, sorry about that. I've learned since then. But I remember we were in Australia and I'm the guy that goes wakes them up, right, for the event. There's like thousands of people waiting. Some are suicidal. And I'm there and I only slept 3 hours. Now, I value sleep. I understand the importance of sleep. So I have a lot of beliefs around that sleep at that time, especially, and I'm dragging ass. I slept 3 hours, going on for weeks. And so I go, we're getting ready and stuff. And he's more concerned about me than the people that are suicidal, and I'm like, in that moment, I'll never forget. I'm like, man, I screwed up. I'm here to give, not to take. And so the next day I slept 2.5 hours. I'm not recommending that. That was just the situation. And I trained with the single purpose of being my best, to summon the lion, as I call it now, but to change my state of being so that I could feel my best. But I used movement and sound and intention and just will to summon that. Because can people perform? Like, and I have clients that are like, but back then I trained a lot of people in the military and they would like not sleep for 3 days and still execute a mission or something like that. You know what I mean? Or like manage a weapon system. And I'm like, well, I can handle 3 hours then, And so it was good to have that comparison. But the real purpose of training. So in that moment, before that, I first started training because there was a girl in my homeroom that I liked. And somehow I got linked up in my head that she liked guys with muscles. And so I started training really hard. I followed the Arnold Schwarzenegger Encyclopedia of Modern Bodybuilding.
I used to have that.
Day.
I used to have that.
Yeah, I was devoted and I loved it. But then it became like a thing. I really liked it. And then I was like, man, girls like guys that are good at sports. So I was like, when I train, I get better at sports. So it was still about girls, which is funny. And then I loved it and I was good at it. And I was playing football in college. I became a strength coach for high school. And then I started training clients. And so then I won the world's best personal training contest. So it became my identity, right? And so I did it, but it was my job. So I felt like I had to do it in order to be worthy of my position. Right? Like I got like these famous clients and stuff. And for me to be worthy to be their trainer and coach, I need to do certain things, but I wasn't really enjoying it because the committed achiever suffers, right? So I was suffering. So I would just hammer it out, I just hammer it out. I'm a disciplined man. That's my identity. So I did it. Right. But I wasn't enjoying it. And then when I made that shift to be my best, to give my best so I can live greatly with no regrets. I haven't missed a single train session in the last decade, not a single day. But the biggest thing was I have not enjoyed a training session in that time because the way I measure my effectiveness is 1, did I challenge my body? 2, did I enjoy it? Because if you don't dig it, you're not going to keep doing it, right? And so every time you train, what people don't realize is the subconscious records everything. That's why you can put someone in hypnosis and have them remember a very traumatic event that their conscious mind blocked out from them, right? And so if you ever saw that, look that up and see that because it's mind blowing. And so the subconscious is recording everything. So whenever you train, and I remember I would train people, I used to stand there and train them. I stopped doing it because it's like being a professional best friend or a professional rep counter. You're not helping them. They rely on you. And what happened was I started traveling. I was flying back from Australia and I saw this video of Tony talk to a woman. And at the same time, clients are texting me and like some of them are trained, but half of them aren't. I set them up with other trainers because there's a whole team of trainers, right? And I'm like, I'm over here teaching trainers and healthcare professionals like how to do this. And half my clients aren't doing it. So I kind of felt like a fraud for a minute. And I was like, something's missing. And I just happened to watch this video of Tony talking to a woman on stage for 50 minutes. So less than an hour. He never talked about what to do or how to do it. And they showed her 2 years later, she lost 200 pounds. He didn't even recognize her when he walked in the room for the interview. And I was like, that's what's missing. And these are things I was doing with myself, but I wasn't doing with clients because, I'm like, you become friendly with clients and then they don't really listen to you as much, right? Like you gotta be a coach, not a trainer. A coach does 2 things. 1, they know who you really are and they remind you of that. And they give you the treasure map. Like, hey, here's the plan. Now I'm going to remind you that you have the power and the capability to execute this. It won't be easy, but who you become in the process will be the real reward. That's the treasure.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes, like in relation to what you had said earlier, like a really successful coach is somebody who helps you, in that early stages of the, number one and number two, self-awareness and self-honesty, right? Because if you can't get it from yourself, like, and I think this is the thing, and I'd love to actually have a chat about this, which is like, for the listener who is sitting there and they're stuck, and I hear this a lot, like when I'm traveling or I'm meeting with business people, it's like, well, I don't have time, or I don't like this, or I don't like going to the gym, or and some of that is story, but some of that's legit. Like if you don't like going to I happen to love going to the gym, and I love throwing around weights. Like I love it. Like, I mean, I just love it. Now I've been doing it since I was 16 years old. So, but in the process between 16 and 53, I have changed my identity around what it is that I'm there for, what my purpose is, what my vision is. Now my training is, yeah, great. I throw around some weights. It's great. I believe that I need to have a, strong muscular structure, but I also, yesterday at the end of my workout, I did a short workout, and then I did 45 minutes of stretching, right? So I'll stretch, multiple times a week. I'll do cardio multiple times a week. I never did that in my 20s or 30s. Like, I just wanted to look good. So my identity has changed a little bit, but I'm curious, like, can we just chat a little bit about, because you brought up identity.
Yeah, that's the next part.
But like I really want, because there's listeners that are listening to us right now. We're having it's a phenomenal conversation, and the content is unbelievable, buddy. Like, this is fucking solid. Like, thank you so much for being here. But we have people who are really stuck, and they need help, and they don't know how to get from, here, wherever they are, wherever that is, to, the process of either developing the identity to, I hate using the word working out. I just, health.
I use the word training,
yeah. Health, wellness, fitness,
yeah.
Whatever the word is for people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm one, not to put words in people's mouths, but they have to choose the word. They have to choose the identity, and then, help evolve that. So I'm curious, because you've got so much experience in this area, and since you brought up identities, can we maybe flush that out a bit?